Hello, thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening in to me today as I share with you my presentation entitled Teacher Involvement in Curriculum Making in Jamaica, a Framework for a Deliberative Democratic Process. My name is Carmel Roofe from the School of Education at the University of the West Indies, Mona, in Jamaica. So Jamaica, like many other small island developing states, is on an ongoing quest to implement curricula that aims to improve access, equity, and quality education for its populace. Curricular initiatives implemented have led to increased access to education in the island. However, the issue of equity and quality education continues to be an ongoing challenge. Schools in Jamaica are varied and stratified based on their location and socio-cultural environment, which in turn influences intentionally or unintentionally how curricular initiatives are developed and implemented. Curriculum making from early years to secondary schooling in Jamaica is rooted in a centralized and prescriptive approach where one group conceptualizes and creates the curriculum and another group implements. This centralized and prescriptive approach to curriculum making has created what I call a separatist mentality between policymakers and implementers. Research conducted on curricular initiatives has often reported teachers indicating they are not involved in the design and development of curricular initiatives. The central authority has often refuted claims of teachers about lack of involvement by stating that teachers have been consulted, have participated in the design of curricula, but not all teachers can be involved, and that teacher involvement has proven problematic in terms of teachers getting release time from their teaching to be involved. Nonetheless, in working with teachers, a famous quote I have often heard from teachers when discussing curriculum making in Jamaica is, and I quote, "Ministry says," referring to the prescription of the central authority. In this sense, teachers are perceived by themselves as mere implementers of an already developed curriculum, rather than viewing curriculum making as a social practice requiring a lived collaborative engagement in conceptualizing, redesigning, and producing an essence of curriculum reflective of the realities of its unique context. Based on recommendations of the 2004 Task Force on Education and evaluation of the revised primary curriculum and the reform of secondary education curriculum, the National Standards Curriculum represents Jamaica's most recent curricular initiative implemented in 2017. Given the ideals of the National Standards Curriculum, and some of these are presented on the slide here, ideals such as differentiated instruction, integration of STEM or STEAM, integration of ICT, 5E teaching model, and evidence-based assessment. So given these ideals and the varied and stratified context of schools in Jamaica, there needs to be a shift in how teachers perceive their involvement and how the central authority perceives teachers' involvement in curriculum making. So the purpose of this study was to, through an understanding of teacher leaders' work, develop a framework for a deliberative democratic process of teacher involvement in curriculum making. This research was guided by the following questions. 1, how do teacher leaders describe their involvement in curriculum making? And 2, in what ways can the work of teacher leaders inform a framework for a deliberative democratic process for teacher involvement in curriculum making? A rationale for focusing on the inquiry of teacher leaders is found in Blair's 2018 view that curriculum is the foundation of what occurs in schools, and teacher leadership is the mechanism for conceptualizing, implementing, and sustaining meaningful change while simultaneously creating challenging educational encounters. So the main concepts that underpin this study include curriculum making. And within the study, I consider curriculum making to stem from the complexities which themselves stem from the social embeddedness of both curriculum as a concept and the social factors involved in such makings. Curriculum making is a job that really never ends and lies at the heart of good teaching. Teacher involvement addresses the ecological autonomy and agency of teachers within the socio-political context within which they operate. Such involvement occurs whether curriculum making is centralized or decentralized. Within this study, deliberative democracy includes deliberation that takes place in context of equal recognition, respect, reciprocity, and balance of power to allow for clear and effective communication to influence decision. Through this process of reasoning and competing arguments, individuals come to an agreement about what procedure, action, or policy will best produce the public good. This therefore suggests that schools must become sites for curriculum contestation, where appropriate curriculum policies, theory, and practices emanate to ensure effective curriculum making. To carry out this study, the 12 teacher leaders were interviewed using semi-structured interviews. And so the study took what I'm calling a narrative design approach. And within this narrative approach, the 12 teacher leaders were selected from a variety of school contexts within Jamaica using criterion and network sampling. And the interviews really sought to understand the personal day-to-day experiences of these teacher leaders. So the data collected was analyzed using narrative analysis. So here I share with you briefly the findings. So the answer to research question 1, how do teacher leaders describe their involvement in curriculum making? The teacher leaders in this study describe their involvement as varied, sometimes described as an isolated event with individualized planning and no common goals, other times deliberative with common goals. Their descriptions, however, suggested that whether individualized or collaborative, their involvement in curriculum making was context or situation driven, making their involvement both process and product. Additionally, they saw their involvement in curriculum making as an investment in the lives of students. And on this slide, I have 3 narratives from 3 of the teacher leaders in the study, but because of time, I will not read them. So towards the second question, the main finding to this question, in what ways can the work of teacher leaders inform a framework for a deliberative democratic process for teacher involvement in curriculum making? The teacher leaders describe the nature of their work as involving reformation. Such reformation, they stated, involved advocacy for students and teachers, initiating, planning and doing whatever it takes to shape or reshape the culture, sharing their experience and expertise with others, and holding themselves and others accountable for what they do. And again, on this slide, I have 3 narratives that you can read for yourselves. So the proposed framework is underpinned by the theory of deliberative democracy. Deliberative democracy indicates that decisions are the product of fair and reasonable discussion and debate. Deliberations, therefore, are intentional and context-led in arriving at the most appropriate solution. It is to be noted that the proposed framework here does not seek to change the centralized approach to curriculum making utilized in Jamaica, but highlights how teachers can become more involved within this framework. So the ideas underpinning this framework are really largely centered on what I term an understanding of the situated context. In other words, the situated context will help to dictate teacher involvement. So here I now share briefly two tenets of the proposed framework. Since Jamaica utilizes a centralized approach to curriculum making, those at the central office must deliberately create room for teachers' experience and expertise by developing appropriate criteria for identifying those teachers who demonstrate expertise and experience that is useful for curriculum making and involve them from the conceptualization stage of curriculum making. Similarly, at the school level, criteria should be used to identify those teachers who actively demonstrate that students' learning is at the center of decision making. Based on the findings of this study, such teachers should showcase that they see the bigger picture and advocate for the necessary change, are responsive in meeting needs whether or not it's within an assigned role. They initiate teaching and non-teaching activities, hold themselves and others responsible or accountable for what they do, are proactive, and are interested in consensus building. The second tenet that I will share within this presentation regarding the framework says those who lead curriculum and other initiatives should utilize language that suggests and communicates that the experience, expertise, and scholarship teachers possess are valued at the school level and at the level of the central authority. Such language should communicate in speech and action, recognition, respect, reciprocity, and balance of power. Some teacher leaders in the study expressed that curriculum making at times was an isolated event, and sometimes they did the work but were not the ones recognized for the work. Additionally, the language must be deliberate and intentional in indicating to schools that curriculum making is an ongoing process and does not end with receiving of directives from the central authority. But these directives should be interpreted in light of the situated context. Such language should demonstrate clearly to schools that leaders and teachers can make their own input to create the most effective experience for students as they seek to achieve the desired standard. As expressed by all the teacher leaders in the study, curriculum making should be driven by situatedness in order to be effective. This also means that curriculum making is messy, hence the need for guidelines for managing deliberations. One important strategy, as found in the study, suggested that deliberations should be driven by contextual data. This means that teachers must learn how to correctly collect, analyze, and store data for use. Such data can then be used at the appropriate time to guide deliberations. Additionally, teachers will need to understand that roles in the curriculum making process will change based on needs of the situated context. In other words, the situated context will dictate experience and expertise of teachers needed, how roles change, when they change, and why they change, the data needed to guide deliberations, and the language of communication utilized. Furthermore, for deliberations to be effective, teachers must possess these key characteristics that I present here on the slide. They must possess a personal internal drive. They must value professional practice. They must have knowledge of the situation, meaning they must possess situational expertise. They must possess a desire to be involved, and they must also be solution-oriented. Drawing upon teachers with such characteristics, knowledge, and expertise will aid in producing more challenging curriculum encounters. Finally, because of the work teachers do, deliberations, whether at the central level or the school level, should therefore involve teachers. Demonstrated by the findings in the study, Given the work that teacher leaders perform and how they describe their involvement in curriculum making, teachers have the capability to make choices, express their opinions, examine their situatedness, and make the best choices during curriculum making. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope that it was helpful in allowing you to come to an understanding about how teachers could become more involved in curriculum making.